Hello, I'm Felix from GMWolf, and today I'll be going over what arrays are and how you can use them with GameMaker. So you can think of arrays like a list of values, a bit like a variable that can hold more than one value. You can access these values with the variable name and the index of the value that you want to look up. So you would have something like, so if we were to visualize it, whoops, you could have a sort of grid basically, and you have your indexes over here, and then here is your indices, quite number, and here you would have your values. So at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, actually it starts at 0, but let's add this in. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you could put any value you want. Of course, this goes on and on. You can go up to, I think it's 32,000 something, quite big like that. So you can have 5, 4, and it can really be anything you want. 2.68, I don't know, whatever you want. And this can be very useful. For example, you can use it to store a list of players that are currently playing if you're making something multiplayer, or you can use it for an inventory system, for example. And the way it works within GameMaker is you start off by creating your array just like any other variable. For example, let's call it this one. Let's say we're doing a list of players. So we would have player. Then to say it's an array, you start with a little square bracket. Any number you want. But most of the time you'll start with 0. And then you just set it to a value, for example 5, because we want value 0 to be equal to 5. Now, this is quite useful because, as you can see, we could just go ahead and, say you weren't going to be using arrays. You could just go player 0 equals 5, and then player 1, etc., etc., just making a huge amount of different variables. However, that's quite clumsy because say you want to access these in order, you could have a sort of, I don't know, for example, you could have player, and then you could say maybe mouse X or whatever, mouse X. And you could say y is equal to player mouse X, and this would mean mean you can use a variable inside that square bracket. It's supposed to be an X, in order to access whatever index you want, and this makes arrays really, really powerful. For example, say you were making an inventory system, and you would store the indexes of each instances of the object you have. For example, you would have, okay, so let's say you have inventory, and you would have at 0, in slot 0, you could have maybe obj underscore sword, for example, and then in inventory 1, you could have another object, etc., etc. And then inside your drawer event, for example, you could actually loop through all the different numbers and write down, draw the object. For example, you could go, you could actually access these in order, or in whatever fashion you want, using any variable in here. And this makes arrays extremely powerful. Now, you can actually use, arrays are a lot more useful when you start using something called a for loop. Now, let me explain what a for loop is really quickly, which is actually, well, really should have its own tutorial by itself. So, but I think I can fit it in this one as well. Let me create a new thing. A for loop is a loop, which means it will actually repeat the code inside it, and it basically works in the following fashion. Generally, you start out with 4, open up your brackets, and then you initialize your first variable, for example, I equals 0. Then you have to put a condition, for example, I is smaller than 50, and then you add in an expression, for example, I plus is equal to 1. And then you can do some code. For example, you could say draw text or whatever, something with the variable I. And what this allows you to do basically is the first time your program will read through a for loop, it will set I to 0. It will then check if I is smaller than 50 or whatever other thing you have over here. It will add 1 to I. No, first it will do whatever is in here, and then add 1 to I. So basically, this will go as follows. It will go I equals 0, is I is equal to small, if I is more than 50, let's actually color code these. Let's make this one red, this one yellow, this one green. To make this easy to understand, let me delete this quickly. Cannot delete it, why not? There you go. There you go. So at first it will make I equal to 0. Next, it will check if I is more than 50, and it's true. It is more than 50. Now, since it is more than 50, it will go ahead and do this part, which I'll color code in blue. And so it will draw out, I don't know, do something with I. For example, draw 0 on screen. Then it will do these green parts. So I will then be equal to 1. Then I is still smaller than 50. Therefore, it will go ahead and draw I. So it will be 1, and then it will check if it will add 1 to I. I is therefore equal to 2, and it will go on checking if I is more than 50 every time. And essentially, what you just did is repeat this code over here 50 times. Let me highlight this in a better way. You're basically repeating this code over here 50 times, and every time it's running through, you're making I bigger by 1. So in the end, you'll end up having 0, you'll end up having 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. until 50. And as you can see, this can be a very powerful system paired with your arrays. So with your arrays, what you can do eventually, once you get the hang of it, is, whoops, that's not what I meant. File, new, no, cancel. I'm really bad at this, aren't I? File, new, don't save. Is you can have a bunch of array values. For example, let's say the array is called R. For example, R0 equals, I don't know, SPR underscore 1, for example, I don't know, and R1 is equal to SPR underscore 6, I don't know, R3, well, 2 first actually, is equal to etc, etc, and it can go on like this for a huge amount of time. And then inside your draw event, for example, you could say draw a sprite of curly normal brackets of R0, well Ri actually, and then you could draw it at, for example, I times 32. 0, and then if you put this within a for loop, so for loop, I'm not actually going to write the whole thing down because I don't have the time for it, you will end up actually drawing every single one of these sprites in order next to each other, because you're timesing I by 32 and you're drawing Ri, and you're using a for loop, so it's going to repeat this code for however long your for loop lasts. And you're going to be able to draw like every single sprite of R. So you're going to end up with R1 over here, and then R2, and then R3, etc., etc. Of course, there's sprites, so whatever. And this can be used in a multitude of different ways. So let's see how we implement these within GameMaker. So I have got a new project right here, which I hope will open up and not crash on me. Ooh, this looks bad. Here you go. Windows just crashed. I hope my recording's still going on. Anyway, what you do is you create a new object, obviously, and let's create a new array. So let's call this array array my first array, my underscore first underscore array. And remember, it's an array, so you need the square brackets, and let's start with 0, and let's make this equal to 5, for example. And let's do this again. My first array 1 is equal to 2. And you can go on like this for quite a bit. Is equal to 5, 4, for example. And now what we can do is simply, to read off these variables, you can do something very simple with, for example, let's use our common system with show message. Convert into a string. My first array 0, because you want to access the first index of this list. And so this will show the first part, which is part number 0, which is right here, which is 5. So this will show a message of 5, and you can just copy this 3 times and have my first array 1 and my first array 2. And hopefully what we should see is first 5, then 2, and 4. Let's see if this works properly. Of course, we need to create a room and place the object inside anywhere you like. Now what we should see is 5, just like we said over here, then 2, and now 4. It's working perfectly. Now let's see what we can do. Let's use the for loop I talked about. So let's delete all this and start the for loop. So remember, for loop starts with 4, open brackets, and let's say I equals 0. You could put any other variable you want here. I'm just used to using I, and it's a common, it's the, you know, it's what people use in the for loop, I. Then you want to check if I is more than 50, for example. Let's just use 5. Maybe 10 to make it more interesting. And then I plus is equal to 1. So remember, this will go through the following piece of code, which I'm going to put in here, 10 times. Every time it's going to go add 1 to I, check if it's more than 10, if so, do the code, etc. Now, of course, in this part right here, you could put anything else that you want. You could actually not even check for I, you could check for something completely different. However, you might end up with an infinite loop. So this is the common use for a for loop, just having something where a value keeps on getting larger. So let's see what we can do with that. So let's create a new array, my array, because it's not your first one anymore. My array, I, and we could maybe make it equal to a random value. Random, maybe between 0 and 10, I don't know. Here you go. And as you can see, what this will do is at my array 0, it will make it equal to a random value between 0 and 10. At my array 1, it will do the same thing, and it will basically make a random value for all the numbers between 0 and 10, for all of the I values, and set a random number between 0 and 10 to it. Now let's copy this for loop, because we're going to use it again, and this time we're going to be showing this. So show message, and we just want to make it into a string so it can be displayed my array I. And what this will do is once again go through all the numbers between 0 and 10 and show whatever is stored inside the array at that index. So let's see if this works properly. It totally should. So let's wait for it to compile. And now, as you can see, it's going to show 10 different random numbers. Now let's take this a step further. Let's actually create a few sprites. So I'm gonna let's create an animation. So sprites can actually have more than one image. They can have as many as you like, really. And this will allow you to create, and normally you would use that for an animation. However, we're going to use it to demonstrate arrays. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Let's make a length to, I don't know, 10. And let's make each of these a bit different. You can press Shift and dot to move across different images. And as you can see, I'm just making them all a bit random. Let's change the color around a bit. And hopefully and this is the first image. Here you go. And as you can see, we have 10 different images in sprite 0. Let's just keep it that way. We can now delete all. We can now go in here and say, for example, my array I is to random 10. And now in the draw event, you can have another one of those for loops, just the one as before. And this time, draw sprite. Now this is a new function, draw sprite. It allows you to draw a sprite, basically. Quite simple. So you want sprite 0. We want to use the sub-image, which is, one of these images, so the first one being 0, the last one being number 9. So as you can see, you have 9 images in one sprite. And so we want it to be my underscore array I, because remember we're inside a for loop, so we have the I variable. And let's draw it at x, let's say 32 times I, so that every time I gets bigger, it moves to the right, and y would be just y. And now, if we go inside, if we press play, we should, hopefully, see a bunch of images, all randomized. And as you can see, we have a set of random images. Some of them are the same, some of them are not. Now, what's interesting is that because we did use a random system, and they all stored inside variables, if we do press play, we can add, as you see, I added more than one of the object 0. I've got 3 of them. And now we have 3 sets of random numbers. So you can see how this can be used to create an inventory system or something else. And I hope this showed you how to use both arrays and the for loops for that matter. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, really quick one today. And I'll see you guys next time for some more tutorials.